Good evening, my name is Dante, and welcome back to my channel. On this channel, I discuss strange and obscure media. Tonight's video is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm just going to chat to you all about some fucked up, gnarly sludge metal that I feel more people should know about. If you're a fan of the stuff that I post, you likely know a thing or two about this genre. Intensely heavy, slow to mid-tempo riffs, punchy rhythms, gritty tones, screamed or shouted vocals, and themes of misanthropy, depression, or substance abuse make up the fundamentals of the genre. Now, there are a few niches or camps that exist within sludge metal. First, you have the classic New Orleans bands whose sound is a bit bluesier or may share ties with stoner metal or grunge. Think I Hate God or Acid Bath. Then you have the more spacious, cleaned up, atmospheric stuff that leans towards post-metal like Neurosis. Then you have the really slow, hideous, droning stuff that sounds downright terrifying like the band Corrupted. The artists I'll be discussing tonight mostly lean towards the latter and are a bit lesser known. The first band I'll be discussing will be the most well-known of this bunch. I am referring to NOOTHGRUSH, a four-piece act who range from California. Shout out to my friend Tessa who requested I mention them. While these folks aren't necessarily a deep cut in sludge, I see them as being a sort of cult classic figure in the genre rather than one that is immediately recognized on surface level. NOOTHGRUSH had two periods of activity, the first from 1994 to 2001. They reformed in 2011 before splitting up a second time in 2018. In that time, they released a number of splits and compilations, as well as toured and played various music fests around the world. Their most recognized work is a compilation known as Erode the Person. The band has a few different releases under this title, but the one that I'm specifically speaking of came out in 1999. Their sound overall was a very no-nonsense, kick-your-teeth, and true-to-form type of sludge metal. Spacious, dire riffing, miserable mid-range screams, pounding drums, utterly hopeless lyrics, and in the great tradition of I Hate God, various sound samples of dialogue detailing misery, anger, and violence. Again, these folks are better known than other artists I'll be discussing in this video, but if you're still somewhat new to the genre, I would say that NOOTHGRUSH are absolutely essential. Next up, we have the debut album of another US act known as TOADLIQUOR. That album is called Feel My Hate, The Power Is Weight, Rest in Peace Kane, and was released in 1993. The title gives a nod to the band's original vocalist Kane, who passed away in 1990. The vocals on this album are handled by Rex, who replaced him in 1991. The image of the cover art is described as a man overcome by rice wine. I haven't been able to find any other information about the context of this photo, but I'm assuming it's just one of the band members passed out after a rough night at the bar. Musicians are credited only by their first names, and from what I've been able to find, don't play in any other bands, so there's a level of anonymity behind the album. The music itself is lo-fi, muddy, painfully slow sludge. The drums pound with a tribal, caveman-like quality, while the riffs drag along in a sinister, low-end muck. There are no lyrics printed, and the vocals consist entirely of agonizing shouts. If you've watched the cartoon Tom and Jerry, think of the way that Tom would scream when he would get hurt, but imagine it angrier and more desperate. That's what the vocals on this album sound like. You can hear this dude's voice cracking and breaking during periods of his performance, really driving home the overall mood of straight up anguish. Musically, the album is comparable to the likes of I Hate God, Grief, and NOOTHGRUSH, though the especially grimy production and tortured vocals really highlight the inhumane and cruel tones of the music. The original pressing was released on a small DIY label, Soledad, based in Washington State, followed by a few singles and split releases throughout the latter half of the 90s. Though the act would split in 1999, their work grabbed the attention of Southern Lord Records, who would release their works on two separate compilations, the first in 2003 and the second in 2018. In 2024, the band returned with a second album titled Back in the Hole, which picks up exactly where the debut left off. I was already pretty taken aback by Khane's sudden return last year, but TOADLIQUOR returning after 25 years of inactivity came as an even bigger surprise. Much like NOOTHGRUSH, these folks have attained a sort of cult classic status in sludge. I see them as being one of the better kept secrets in the genre. The next band is a British act known as KOREISCH, and their lone album, This Decaying Schizophrenic Christ Complex, released in 1999. The band came together in the hardcore scene of Sheffield, a city located in South Yorkshire, England. Several members of the band previously played in a metalcore act known as Slave Arc. However, KOREISCH took things in a far more volatile direction. This Decaying Schizophrenic Christ Complex. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna call it KOREISCH's album from here on out. It's not as lengthy as the title of Warmflim's demo, but it's still a mouthful. Anyway, KOREISCH's album starts off with some dark ambient sounds and a sample from David Lynch's film Eraserhead. Everything is fine. If you're familiar with that movie, I'm sure you know that anytime that sample is used, it is an indicator that everything most certainly is not fine. Anyway, after this opener, the music explodes into a mix of sludge and grindcore riffs with high-pitched screams and chaotic drumming. The guitar tones are super scratchy, fuzzy, and abrasive. The vocals are absolutely scathing, with lyrical themes of anti-Christianity and the apocalypse. Interludes of industrial, dark ambient, and noise work their way into the mix as the songs flow together to make one lengthy composition. After this album, the band split and formed a new act called the Kevorkian Solution, which went in more of a mathcore direction, away from the blistering sludge of KOREISCH. I feel that KOREISCH's album would be particularly well received by those who are familiar with the album Sadness Will Prevail by Today Is the Day. That's not to say that they sound the same or that I'm trying to compare the two. I just feel as though there is a similar deranged air between the two albums that fans of Today Is the Day would probably really enjoy this. Another band that I feel lean into this type of deranged, spastic approach to sludge would be GOATSBLOOD. GOATSBLOOD were a Canadian act from Vancouver who were active from 1999 to 2006. During that time, they released a few splits as well as 2 full-length albums, a self-titled debut released in 2000 and a follow-up titled Drool in 2003. In 2022, an archive release titled Detriment surfaced online, featuring material recorded in 2004. To put it bluntly, GOATSBLOOD are absolutely savage. To be poetic, I would describe their music as the audio equivalent of a road rage incident turned homicidal, or suffering a psychotic break and trashing your apartment, or being repeatedly beaten over the head with a hammer, or maybe all of the above. Fun, uplifting jams to play at all of your parties. Real talk though, their music could be described as a combination between painfully slow, drony sludge and violent outbursts of grindcore. The riffs pummel and bludgeon alongside sharp drum tones and hatefully shrieked vocals. Drool is the preferred album of the two and gets the most attention, though I find that the band's work as a whole is pretty consistent both in quality and stylistic approach. Also, just a funny tidbit, the band were signed to a label called Willowtip Records, and when you look GOATSBLOOD up on the label's website, it doesn't feature a description of their sound or history. Rather, a post from the bassist recounting a time that one of their live shows erupted in a violent bar fight. It's kind of like the label were using that story to give you an idea of what you were in for with the band without describing their music before you listen to it. It's a little bit lengthy for me to read off here, but I'll link it in the description if you're interested. It is a pretty great read. Really though, I enjoy how much GOATSBLOOD's music packs a punch. I was originally going to include it in a Not Safe for Life albums video, but it seemed better suited here. The last band I will be discussing tonight were an incredibly elusive act known as REDRIGHTHAND. These folks reigned from England and had 2 stints of activity. Their initial formation was in 1998 before they split up in 2001. They reformed in 2002 with a new drummer and bassist before splitting up a second time in 2006. They recorded a debut in 2004, but it would not see an official release until 2011. Guitarist Paul Robertson would team up with Scottish label At War with False Noise to put out this posthumous album. The name of that album is They Sang and Chanted for Hours, Then the Locked-In Hundreds Set Themselves Ablaze. I have to say, this is one of my favorite album titles. It is so creepy and sets the tone for the music perfectly. Likewise, the super sparse artwork gives me the same impression as like some mysterious true crime media. The music of Red Right Hand blurred the lines between sludge and drone metal. The riffs are supremely heavy and despondent, blaring along at a glacial tempo while the drums fall in and out with menacing beats. The vocals consist of distorted, high-range screams that are placed just deep enough in the mix that they sound as though they are being suffocated by the rest of the music. What I appreciate the most about Red Right Hand is the air of suspense on the 4 tracks of this album. To me, it sounds like the lead-up of a violent, premeditated attack of a serial killer. In this regard, I'm reminded a bit of the debut album of Khanate, though the execution here is far more subtle and less chaotic. Just the last tidbit on the album that I found amusing. The band's guitarist Paul had a blog post where he spoke about the process of the album in reference to when they originally recorded in 2004. We awaited its release eagerly, and waited, and waited. It never came. The band broke up due to lack of direction following the non-emergence of the record, our vocalist moving to Sweden, and my erratic moods and general instability. All I can say to that is same, dude, specifically the last part of that statement. Anyway, that wraps up these selections for tonight. I hope this has given you some cool recommendations to dig up. I have more artists within this niche that I'd like to cover, as well as a few that you all have requested, so expect to see more of this particular topic in the future. If you liked this video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. You can also support my work by following me on Instagram, TikTok, or Reddit. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening.